Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Kentucky for yielding me the customary half hour, and I yield myself such time as they may consume. Mr. Speaker, another week, another round of trivial messaging bills. That's all this Republican majority can do. One pointless messaging bill after another that will never, ever become law. In fact, we haven't passed a single bill out of the Rules Committee that's become law in 9 months. 9 months. Now, first, let's talk about H.R. 6276, a bill that's supposed to help measure and evaluate federal building utilization. This bill seems to do with the Republican belief that working from home is always bad, no matter what. Don't get me wrong, I hate Teams meetings and I hate Zoom calls as much as everyone else. But can Republicans please acknowledge that it's 2024 and people can work from home? Basically, this bill says that if a federal employee works from home 1 day a week, they are no longer counted as being, quote, in the office. Ignore the 4 days a week that they're in the office. If they work from home once, they're not in the office. Oh, and by the way, we're going to get rid of their desks because they work from home once. I mean, come on. It's just a silly solution. This bill fails to capture even the fundamental nature of some of our most vital jobs in our federal workforce. For example, if you are a food inspector who spends 4 days a week ensuring that our food supply is safe and secure, this bill would not count them for occupancy, which could eventually lead to eliminating their office space. Or if you are a federal firefighter protecting the lives and property of countless Americans week after week after week, but not sitting at a desk for 40 hours, this bill would say, nope, you won't be counted and you won't need to have a desk. Now, if we want our federal workforce to be the best in the world, we need to compete. We need to give people the flexibility to work from home, just like other employers do in the private sector. Something that this bill discourages. And for those reasons, I believe it's a bad bill, and I'll be voting no. Next, and get this, next we have H.Res. 1065, which, and let me quote from the actual resolution here, it calls on the President to detain and remove specific individuals from the United States. I have news for you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans are in charge of this body, barely in charge, but in charge nonetheless. They don't have to call on the President to do anything. This isn't a debate club, for God's sake. Pass a bill and change the damn policy if you don't like it, Mr. Speaker. Oh, wait. Republicans don't want to do anything about immigration or the border. They just want to complain and talk about their feelings. Let me talk to my friends like I'm talking to one of the 6th grade classes from my district that comes down and tours Washington every year. If you want a bill to become a law, you have to pass a bill. There's a difference between a bill, which starts with the abbreviation HR, and a resolution, which starts with the abbreviation H.Res. And I'll spell it out for you. That's H period, R-E-S period. Now, some people think HR stands for House Resolution. It actually stands for House of Representatives. And H.Res. stands for House Resolution. But let's move on, because I only have 30 minutes. The Constitution gives Congress the power to legislate, and we do that by passing bills. Bills can change policy. Bills can change taxes, fund programs, regulate interstate commerce. Hell, bills can even force the President of the United States to do something. They go to the Senate, and then the Senate can pass it and send it to the President. The President can either veto it and send it back to us or sign it into law. That's how a bill becomes a law. My Republican friends might have forgotten this, so it's helpful to remind them. This resolution on the border cannot become law because it is not a bill. It is a resolution, House Resolution 1065. See, it's right here, Mr. Speaker. And if this resolution passes the House, it will go nowhere. it will just be put on a website and sent out as a press release. This resolution just tells people how you feel about the border. Mr. Speaker, it's a way for Republicans to talk about their feelings. And I know Republicans have a lot of big feelings on the border. Now, Democrats care about the border too. But the difference is we actually want to do something about it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for non-binding resolutions. But this isn't it. This isn't it. We're not going to reform our broken immigration system with a non-binding resolution. We are just not. And we had a bipartisan deal on border security that Republicans initially supported until Donald Trump called, and then they changed their minds. And they killed it. Republicans killed a bipartisan border security deal, a bill that was negotiated by the second most conservative Republican in the United States Senate. They killed it. And so what do they bring up instead? Not a bill, but a resolution, a meaningless resolution. This resolution, H-Res 1065, which changes no law, which will not go to the Senate, which is literally a press release talking about their feelings. Now here's the kicker. This bill, H-Res 1065, it's almost identical to a similar resolution that we dealt with only 3 months ago. So not only does it do nothing, but it's a repeat. They're so bad at legislating that they're even bad at not legislating. This is all they have to offer, Mr. Speaker, half-baked, empty resolutions that don't address any of the fundamental concerns at our southern border. Oh, sure, they like to pretend that they care about border security on right-wing TV so that Trump and Republican candidates can use it as a campaign slogan in November. They're really good at that. They go on Fox News and say, secure the border, secure the border. But then they kill bills that try to do anything about the border. They killed the bipartisan border security bill that came out of the United States Senate, a bill that would have provided more funding so we could have more people at the border, patrolling our border, a bill that would provide more money for judges to accelerate consideration of asylum claims, a bill, by the way, that was supported by the Border Patrol Union that is at the border. Now, the only thing that they say they will agree to is their grossly partisan H.R. 2, seemingly ignoring the fact that H.R. 2 lost in the Senate already. It failed bigly. It only got 32 votes. In fact, the gentleman across the aisle from Kentucky even voted against H.R. 2. But even if it were to pass the Senate, President Biden would never sign it into law because it's a crappy bill. And I got a little whiplash, Mr. Speaker, because on one hand, I hear from my Republican friends that H.R. 2 or nothing, H.R. 2 or nothing, and then we had a gentleman on the Republican side come and do 1 minute and say, we don't need any legislation at all to do anything. We don't have to pass anything. So you got to pick one or the other. But look, any way you square it, Republicans now own the border crisis. Democrats have given them every opportunity to work together, and we have been turned down by a Republican Party that does not want to solve problems or govern. So guess what? They own the border. They own the fentanyl crisis. They own all of it. This is their issue. They continue to pass meaningless resolutions like this, which do nothing. They continue to scream and yell in committees and on the House floor. They continue to use victims of crimes as props. But when push comes to shove, they don't do a damn thing. They vote against more funding for border security. They reject serious proposals for border security. They don't want to solve this problem. They want a crisis because they think it helps them in November. What a rotten, cynical, awful way to treat the people of this country. What a terrible way to govern. This isn't serious legislation. It is a press release. It's embarrassing. House Republicans have no new ideas, so they're just going to keep passing the same meaningless resolution every week until they lose in November. Maybe then they'll realize that this is a bad strategy, that it's a bad idea to treat the American people like they're idiots, because the American people are smart, Mr. Speaker. They see what Republicans are doing, obstructing, and then blaming Democrats for the obstruction that they created. and passing silly, non-binding resolutions that do nothing instead of actually working with us to get stuff done. Democrats actually want to get something done on the border. We want to stop the fentanyl from coming into our country. We want to fix the broken immigration system. And Republicans own this issue now because they rejected a bipartisan deal and they refuse to work together. They refuse to put people over politics and work with us to address our problems at the border. Let me just conclude, Mr. Speaker, by again reminding my friends on the other side of the aisle, and I would say this to a sixth grade class if they came to visit to Washington, that we now have divided government. We have, again, a House of Representatives barely controlled by Republicans, a United States Senate barely controlled by Democrats, and a Democrat in the White House. This notion of my way or the highway for either side is a non-starter. If you want to get something done, you got to work together. And for heaven's sakes, I'd like to think that you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And we ought to be able to agree on something like more support for border security along both our southern and our northern border. We ought to be able to agree that we ought to have more judges to evaluate asylum claims so people aren't here for months and months and months or years, that we can resolve these claims efficiently and effectively in a matter of weeks. You know, and we ought to also, rather than doing non-binding resolutions, be addressing the situation in Ukraine. Ukraine is out of, they're out of equipment. I mean, I don't know why my friends on the other side of the aisle seem so dedicated to giving Putin a victory, but Ukraine is running out of time. Why haven't you scheduled a vote on a bill to provide Ukraine the military assistance that they need so that they can repel the Russians, so they can stop Putin? They're out of time. They're out of time. And if Ukraine falls, my friends own that too. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve my time.